Okay, so a friend of mine got in touch and asked me to help him out. He's a concept artist, learning Blender, and he wanted to know how I would go about making some specific simple shapes. And he sent me across a picture and said, "How would you do this?" So let's jump straight in and have a look at it. It's this sort of arch shape, and well, these two arch shapes for this roof. I'm not sure whose artwork it is. It's very beautiful. Unfortunately, I didn't get a credit along with the email, so I'm not certain whose work it is. I do apologize. But I will show you how I would go about creating this sort of geometry. So the first thing I'd do is I'm going to work with a plane. So I Shift A, mesh, plane. And the reason I like to work with a plane is, work with as few dimensions as possible whilst you're getting started. You only need to add those extra dimensions later on. So what we can do with this is go into edit mode, S and X to scale along the X-axis, Control R to add a loop cut, and then that gives us this little pop-up down here, and we can dial up however many loops we want. For this, I'm going to do 11. There we go, lovely. And I think it's probably a bit too chunky, so I'm going to scale it on the Y, so S and Y to scale it on the Y-axis. And then I'm going to add a simple deform modifier. And bear in mind that the orientation in the way I'm doing this, orienting it in the world in the manner I have is very particular, because this modifier only works in a particular fashion, and I couldn't possibly explain why, but it's very finicky. So simple deform, and I'm going to change it to bend on the Z. And then I can choose my angle. You can see it's bending it on the Z axis. And then we can just, we can rotate it minus 90 on the X in world space, and we'll have to apply that later because you don't want to leave any of these transforms unapplied, because that will cause you headaches down the line. Then what we can do is we can solidify this and pull that out, and that's great. We've got some solidity. See what I mean about work in one dimension and then add the extra dimensions as needed. And then we can add a bevel modifier, and we can just choose how these edges are going to look, dial that up a touch. We can change the shading mode to shade auto smooth, and change the angle of this as is appropriate, whatever suits you. And I might just add a subdivision surface as well. Oops. Worth taking your time to play with that bevel modifier to get the look that you want. Yeah, so that's how I would get a basic sort of arc and continue to play with this as much as you want. Yeah, that's how I would do it in a very, very procedural manner. And then what we can do is we can apply these modifiers and apply Control A, apply rotation to clear that off, and we have our very handsome geometry ready to go. Now, if that's too clean and not enough control for you, this is the manual way of doing it, which will give you a great deal more control, but it's less procedural. So I'm going to add another plane, and I will rotate it. So RX 90. And I'm just going to sort of go into edit mode, and I'm going to bring it up here. I'm going to set it up against my model, and I'm going to sort of like start with, this. I'm going to basically use a mirror modifier, so I want a line of symmetry. So I'm going to keep it all on the left of this origin point. And just start pulling my verts around. So I'm going to shift select those vertices, hit G to move them. And again, I'm doing this in the front orthographic camera, which you get to with Alt, middle mouse, swiping, or you can choose cameras up here or use your numpad. But I'm doing it in this front orthographic camera, so I'm only dealing with 2 axes at a time. I'm not worried about the depth. It's not going to accidentally start pushing my verts this way or that way, because I'm in an orthographic camera. So it's control, So yeah, once I've set that basic bit up, I can hit E to extrude, and then just drag it out, select one of the verts, move it again, E to extrude, selecting, using G to transform and translate the position. I'm just lining it up along here with the image, and obviously I'm going to have to use my imagination a little bit, because this isn't a flat-on sort of illustration of the shape. So I'm having to sort of imagine where things might be to some extent, but you know, Po body's no effect. Right, that looks about right. It'd be nice if these were a little bit more, so I can use double G to slide along edges, slide the vert along the edges, just so that these edges are quite nicely lined up. Not that it matters a great deal, but, you know, perfectionism, who knows. Maybe it'll pay off in the end. So I'm going to add a mirror modifier. Just show you that again. Add modifier, mirror. And I'm going to grab these 2 points and active element on my pivot. So this is just choosing the point where I'm transforming from, S, X, 0. So I'm scaling it on the 0, which is basically just going to align them on the x-axis with one another. And then I can pull this back and forth until they're touching. Turn clipping on so that I can't accidentally pull them past one another. And then dial up the merge setting ever so slightly, and that will merge these vertices, which means we'll get a cleaner result further down the modifier stack as we start adding things. So now I'm going to add some depth to this with solidify. Lovely. Again, I'll add a bevel. Very nice. And I'm definitely going to want some subdivision to sort of smooth this stuff out. Although that's still looking a bit heinous. So what can we do about that? Well, now we've got this sort of basic setup in the look sort of dialed in, we can go in and add some more geometry or tweak the geometry just by pulling these because we're only dealing with one sort of plane of, you know, one dimension of verts and edges. So it's really simple to manipulate and have a play and see what it does and how their positioning affects the subdivision modifier. Very nice. Can really sort of massage these points into the right position for you. And then what we could do is add Control R to add another loop, and then we can sort of pull this out just to change how this is sort of looking. Again, we could do that again. Bear in mind this Control R it's based on, you know, you've got to move your mouse around. So Control R, and then depending on where your mouse position is where it will add that loop cut. Lovely jubbly. So there we go. That's a pretty easy way of going about creating nice clean shapes. We could shade auto smooth on that to get rid of that banding. Again, you know, we could maybe play with that position to get it a bit smoother if we need to. Yeah, that's about it. So once you're satisfied with all of this and you want to apply it, there is a quicker way of applying this rather than going one by one through this. We can just search. So that's spacebar for me. It might be F3 for you, depending on your key map. And we'll just type in convert to mesh. Converts to mesh, and that just applies all the modifiers in one go. And then we just need to apply this rotation. So Control A, apply rotation. And that's our shape. Oops. Nice and clean. Nice and easy. And hopefully that helps. So that's it. Hopefully that helps you. It's I mean, there's a million ways to do everything in Blender. So those are just two ways of creating clean, simple shapes. As I said, I hope it helps. And but that's all from me. Like and subscribe, all that jazz.